In the last video, we have seen what are Python variables and Python constants. So how to create them, how to use them. So in this video, we'll see how to use Python identifiers. Identifiers in Python or in any programming language refers to the names that are used for variables, constants, functions, classes, or for the objects. So in this video, we'll see with the examples. So what are the rules that are need to be followed for the creation of the identifiers? So now we understand that identifiers are the names given to the variables, constants, functions, classes, or the objects. So with the help of the variables, so we'll see what are the rules that are to be followed for the naming of the identifiers, and the same rules are applicable for the other identifier names also. So consider for example, so A is a variable I am creating where I am storing the value 10. So while naming these variables, we need to follow some rules. One useful guideline to create the identifiers is, so always better to use the meaningful names. So here I am using a name A, but it doesn't give any clue about this value. So whether you are referring to the variable to represent the age of a person or marks of the person or some other value. So it is not giving any clue. So to avoid that kind of confusion or to make it better inference, you better use the meaningful name. Say for example, so this value I want to refer to the age of a person. So instead of simply using the name A, you better use the age itself, so that I can understand the variable is representing the age of a person. So that is how it is always better to use meaningful names for the identifiers. That is one of the useful guidelines for the creation of the identifiers. Now let's see what are the rules that are to be followed while creation of these variable names or the identifier names. The first rule is any valid identifier name can include either the alphabets or the digits or the underscore symbol. Other than that, so no other special symbols are allowed in the variable name. Say for example, here I am going to create a variable with the name age ampersand. So here ampersand is a special symbol which is not valid. So such kind of special symbols are not valid at all. So while creating the identifier names, you should be little careful. So age is valid because so the name contains only the alphabet, so it is valid. So now I am creating another variable with the name marks. So of course marks is also a valid variable, so which contains the alphabets only. So it is valid. Now say for example, I want to include the digits also in the variable. Say for example, marks 1. So here the variable name contains both the alphabets and the digits. So that is also valid. So you will not get any issue while creation of this variable also. But there is one rule that is to be followed. Whenever you are using digits in your identifier names, identifier should never start with a digit. Say for example, when you are using 1 marks is not valid because the variable starts with a digit. So variables or the identifier names should never start with digits. Either they can start with the alphabet or they can even start with the underscore symbol also. Say for example, underscore marks. So it is valid. First and foremost rule you need to remember is the identifier names so shall start with the underscore or the alphabet symbol. Even you can have the capital letters also. So you can include so either uppercase or the lowercase alphabets. It is valid. So you can even include marks in physics. Say for example, whenever the identifier names are too lengthy, so that say for example, if they contain multiple words, then to connect the words, so you can use underscore symbol. So that is how you can follow. So you need to observe one thing, Python is a case sensitive language. The variables or the identifiers that are declared in different cases refers to different identifiers. So consider this example here. So here we are using marks with different cases and we are using to store different values. So if you observe, though you are using the same names, the first variable marks is different from the second variable marks. It is only because of the case you are using. So if you observe marks with a capital case, that variable is referring to the value 50 as you have stored 50 in that variable. Whereas marks with all small case, so that variable is storing the value 60 as you have stored the value 60. So that is how, so though you are using the same names also, so the case matters here. So while creating the variables or the identifiers, you should be little careful while using the uppercase and the lowercase variables. And one more thing you need to remember is, whenever you are using all the capital case in the variable names, they refer to the constant values. Say for example, I am using pi as a constant here. So, I use all capital K's in the variable pi. That is how pi indicates that a constant. Remember one thing, while using the identifier names, keywords, that means which are reserved for some special purpose, so they should never be used here. So, I am trying to use true as a variable, which is invalid. So, the second rule you need to remember is keywords should never be used as identifier names. So, now we understand that variable names can contain a combination of alphabets or digits or the underscore symbols, but special symbols are not valid. So, though the variables or the identifiers are allowed to have the combination of alphabets and digits, so they should not start with a digit. So, identifier names which start with the digit names, they are not valid. Moreover, it is not valid to use keywords as the identifier names. So, we have seen what is valid and what is not valid with the help of the variable names. Now, let us create some class definitions and see. So, now I am going to, so whatever the rules that we have seen for the variables, so the same rules are applicable for the creation of the other identifier names also. So, consider the example of creating a class. So, here I am using student as a class name, so which is valid. So, just for example, I am creating, so this class student as a class name here. So, now let us create one function. So, fun is a function. So, fun is my function name here, this is the identifier. So, here student is the identifier. So, fun is a valid identifier I am using, so it is not generating any issue. So, that is how you can use the identifier names. So, now we understand what are the rules that are to be followed while creating the identifier names. Now, I hope you understand what are the rules that are to be followed while using the identifiers as the names for the variables, the classes, functions or the objects. Thank you for watching the video.